We took a look at the data, selected the clips you watched the most, and put them together into this list. Want to see what happens when you start drinking at 6 in the morning? Keep watching. Matt was towing a trailer full of wooden fence posts when a Ford Explorer hopped a curb in reverse before plowing into his 2017 Jeep Wrangler. The Explorer driver claims he got his foot stuck under the brake pedal, evidently with his other foot smashing the accelerator. While in reverse, the Explorer bounced off a Cadillac before jumping the curb, destroying a section of wooden fence, and finally slamming into Matt's Jeep. He continued flooring the gas for 30 seconds before finally turning off the car. For his part, Matt had seen the out-of-control SUV and had stopped, but he had no time to back up, especially considering that he was pulling a trailer at the time. Matt says the guy was very apologetic and couldn't figure out how his foot had gotten stuck like that, but Matt has a theory about that. After the police arrived, the Explorer driver was arrested for driving under the influence. Matt sent his dashcam footage to the other driver's insurance provider and they paid to have the Jeep repaired after accepting responsibility. Matt says the guy's wife was way more upset with him than he was. We're all just glad the Explorer's steering wheel was turned to the left and not to the right. There was a kid's birthday party happening in the park on the other side of the parking lot when this all went down. Steven was waiting to turn left at a red light when he watched another driver run their red light, T-boning a car and pushing it into Steven's Trailblazer. The car that was T-boned was being driven by an elderly gentleman and he sustained moderate injuries. Neither Steven nor the woman who had run the red light were hurt. All three vehicles were heavily damaged, but Steven is still waiting on repairs and doesn't know how much the final bill will be. This is just another reminder of why you should always stop at a red light, even if it has only been red for a second. Brandon had just dropped off a package at UPS and noticed his friend and coworker on the opposite side of an intersection while they both waited for a fire engine to pass. Watch what happened after the light turned green. A speeding pickup truck ran the red light, taking the front of Brandon's friend's car clean off. The truck was doing at least 60 miles per hour and never attempted to swerve or brake. The car was totaled, and the pickup driver accepted responsibility. Brandon took his friend to the emergency room, but they determined he wasn't seriously injured. Ethan was headed home from school in his 2006 Mercedes-Benz E500 and had just entered the passing lane to go around a BMW when the Nissan Sentra in front of him rear-ended a truck. Ethan slammed on his brakes, but it wasn't enough. He rear-ended the Sentra, turning this into a 3-car accident. He was slapped with a $250 fine, and his liability-only insurance didn't cover any repairs to his car after he was found to be at fault for the accident. He spent a month rebuilding his car himself in his driveway, using parts from another Mercedes with a blown engine. It still needs paint, but I'd say that's not bad for an 18-year-old fixing his first car. Herb was driving in Las Vegas when he watched another driver run a red light. That's not what this clip is about though. While Herb was waiting for the light to turn green, as one does when at a red light, an oncoming driver ignored the red light and drove straight through it, getting T-boned in the process. The vehicle kept rolling after the impact, slamming into Herb's Nissan Frontier. The Chevy was a rental and the driver was drunk. When the police came, he didn't remember running the red light and told them that he'd been run into twice. The airbags in Herb's truck had deployed and all 3 vehicles had to be towed. Fortunately, there were no major injuries. Herb asked us to shout out his wife Jessica and her friend Jennifer. They both love the Wham Bam channels and can't wait to upgrade to Teslas someday. Alti Fox was driving down I-57 when he noticed the driver of a white car driving erratically, swerving back and forth and struggling to maintain his lane. He also kept varying his speed anywhere from 40 to 80 miles per hour. Suspecting the guy was intoxicated, Alti Fox got on the phone with the state police. Watch what happened after they both took the exit to I-74. After several close calls, the car finally clipped the concrete barrier, rupturing a tire in the impact. The driver finally pulled over, and Altifox stopped to try to talk to him. Altifox says the guy was obviously drunk, stumbling and mumbling. Altifox left and headed back to I-57. By the time he drove past the same spot, the guy was already gone. Altifox thinks he'd probably driven away, minus a tire, and he never did hear back from the state police. K0D was headed to a store to buy school supplies when a lady driving a Toyota Corolla failed to yield to traffic and pulled in front of him. He locked up his brakes and honked, but he couldn't stop fast enough to avoid a collision. The Toyota driver then smashed the gas, hopped a curb, and hit a parked Lexus before finally stopping. The lady in her 40s accused K0D of merging into her, and she even summoned family and friends to the scene to lie and say they'd seen the accident and that K0D was at fault. When the police arrived, they declared the Toyota driver at fault as soon as they saw the dashcam footage. They cited her for 3 separate infractions. Her insurance provider, Progressive, which happens to be the insurance provider for the Toyota and the Lexus owners as well, refused to provide him with a rental car, and they only offered him 1/3 of what the car was worth. They also won't replace the laptop he'd borrowed from his university that was damaged in the accident, and the university is now threatening to withhold his registration. Fortunately, K0D has hired an attorney, and they're currently fighting the insurance company for better compensation. Check out what happened to Tim as he was headed to school. He was driving his BMW about 45 miles per hour when another driver failed to yield and pulled out in front of him. He was able to get out of his car on his own and disconnect the battery, but bystanders made sure he was rushed to the hospital. He had extensive internal injuries, and he spent a week and a half in the hospital and another 3 months in physical therapy, plus a month of psychotherapy. He received $8,600 for his totaled car and his pain and suffering. He's working on trying to get the car roadworthy again, but in the meantime, he's driving this BMW E39 540i, his dream car. Be careful out there, Tim. We're glad you're okay. Ram was heading into a hospital parking lot when he had an encounter with a very pleasant pickup driver. Ram started turning into an open parking spot when the pickup driver suddenly floored the accelerator in reverse, blocking him from parking. The pickup driver screamed at Ram through his open window, apparently upset because he thought Ram was going to steal his parking spot. He then backed up the rest of the way, nicely overlapping into the spot Ram had actually been planning to use. Clearly, this guy is such a highly skilled driver, the parking lines just don't apply to his compensate mobile. Since Ram possesses a modicum of emotional stability, unlike the other guy, he gladly parked in a different spot and ignored the third-grade insults that had been hurled in his direction. Jaden was headed to a Toyota dealership when his Hyundai Sonata was rear-ended by an SUV, spinning at 90 degrees and ripping off half of the rear bumper cover and a taillight. Jaden asked the dealership for their security footage of the accident, which gives us a much better angle of what happened. The SUV driver started driving away at first, but stopped a few blocks down the road due to deployed airbags. The car was totaled and had to be taken away on a flatbed truck. Jaden and his passengers were transported to the hospital as a precaution, but they were uninjured. The other driver's insurance provider paid Jaden $23,000 for the vehicle and hospital bill, and he replaced his Hyundai with a Mercedes SLK 350 Sport Convertible. Upgrade! This submitter was headed home after filling up his tank. As he pulled out onto the road, the passenger of a pickup truck turning the other way flipped him off for no reason. So he returned the favor, admittedly not the best move. A while later, he noticed the same pickup racing up behind him. The driver overtook him before slamming on the brakes, bringing them both to a standstill. Then, the driver got out and started inviting our submitter to fight him. Instead of accepting this invitation, he drove around the deranged man to get away. When he did, the pickup driver slapped his side mirror, shattering the glass, cracking the cover, and chipping the passenger window. Our submitter pulled in front of him and took a quick video of his license plate with his phone. The pickup driver must have realized that he'd committed a crime because he reversed away as our submitter filmed him. Thanks to the dashcam footage, it didn't take long for our submitter to find the guy and take him to court. He never once showed remorse, repeating that this all could have been avoided if only our submitter hadn't flipped him off, as if he then had no choice but to react with violence. Needless to say, this excuse didn't work with the judge. The attacker has to pay our submitter almost $600 to fix his mirror, which is actually less than the total repair bill. I guess our submitter felt generous, even though the other guy doesn't feel bad at all. Kyle was driving his 2017 Audi A4 at about 30 miles per hour. As he approached an intersection, his view was obstructed by traffic in the left turn lane, and he assumed those drivers were yielding for oncoming traffic. Actually, traffic had stopped for an ambulance with lights and siren active. Kyle didn't see it until he'd already entered the intersection, and his attempt to brake wasn't enough to prevent a collision. Kyle filed an insurance claim, including his dashcam footage as evidence. When police arrived, they watched his video and chose not to give him a citation. The car was totaled and towed away. Kyle's still waiting to hear who was found to be at fault for the accident, but he wants to know what you think. Let him know in a comment below. Nick was driving about 30 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone and catching up to another vehicle going about 20 miles per hour. Since the lane lines indicated passing was allowed, Nick decided to pass the vehicle. Just as he made his move, the driver of the pickup truck put on their turn signal and immediately began turning left. Nick stood on the brake pedal, but the pickup driver had practically stopped to make their turn, and there was no way he could avoid hitting them. Luckily, nobody was injured. At first, the other driver's insurance provider found Nick to be 100% at fault, but their version of events kept changing, and each time their account was disproved by the dashcam footage. At one point, they said Nick had attempted passing over double yellow lines. After this was refuted, they said their customer had used their turn signal early, but that's not true either. Both Nick and his own insurance provider are still fighting over who's at fault. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Peyton was on his way home when he watched a Dodge pickup truck hydroplane and lose control. The truck spun and collided with the median barrier before coming to rest in Peyton's lane, where he had no chance to stop even after slamming on his brakes. The accident did $53,000 in damage to Peyton's 2-month-old truck and the trailer he'd been pulling. At first, the other driver's insurance provider refused to pay for the damage, but after he sent them the dashcam footage, the process went a lot more smoothly. Juanito was driving in Chicago when the driver of a black GMC SUV pulled into his lane. He flashed his high beams at her, but she didn't budge, so he just went around her. Evidently, this outraged the GMC driver, who proceeded to follow Juanito, prompting him to turn onto a side street to avoid a confrontation. The GMC driver followed Juanito anyway by reversing and turning down the same street, then cut off and brake checked him. When he finally got around her before a traffic light, she drove up onto the sidewalk to get next to him. She proceeded to flip him off and yell at him, which he couldn't understand through his windows, while another young woman in the back seat waved a baseball bat at him. She then tossed a drink out of the window before driving off. Juanito ended up following her inadvertently since he was headed the same way, and she brake checked him one more time before he swerved around her and drove away. He drove to a nearby police station and waited a few minutes in the parking lot before heading home, just in case.